welcome to the latest edition of Tuckerstone Insights. Our mission at Tuckerstone is to power the business of HR. And there's no way that's better personified by an HR professional moving into a senior business lead role. Unfortunately, that's very rare, and it's something that we would like to see more of. But I'm delighted to be joined by one of the unicorns who has made that switch, and that is Olga McSweeney. Nice to see you, Olga.
Oh, nice to see you, Hugo, and thank you for such a lovely introduction. I don't think I've been called a unicorn before, all sorts, but that is
good.
the first. Thank you.
Excellent. So Olga is the Strategy and Operations Director at the accountancy firm BDO for their tax stream. And she and I have known each other for a long time because she's come up through the ranks of HR. But I'd love to start by potentially getting a career summary from you, and perhaps for you to tell us a bit more about your current role.
That would be great. I will start with my current role, actually, if that's okay. So Strategy and Operations Director in the tax stream. So what I do is that I work with the leadership team on strategy development and continuous review of the strategy, because we live in a changing world. And so we always need to look out for what's changing and change our strategy. And if you don't change, if you don't go anywhere, if you stay where you are, you don't need a strategy. But we know that we are going places in our business, and that's very exciting. What it means that I also look after the transformation agenda. So I look after a program of our change initiatives in the tax stream. And another part of the role that is really, really prominent and big is the considerations about organizational design, because we always need to make sure that org design is fit for purpose now and for the future. And that's actually quite a nice throwback to my previous career, because that's where it gets a little bit easier for me. I've been in the role for 6 years, and as you mentioned, Hugo, I come from the HR background, and I spent 17 years in HR, and I started my career as an HR assistant. It was in a smaller organization, which was great because what it enabled me to do is really, have a hand at pretty much every single specialism that you can have in HR. I did payroll, US and UK, benefits, learning and development, loads of recruitment, all of the cyclical processes, all of the administration, introduction of the new HR system into the company, and even what's today called global mobility, which back in the day was simply relocation and looking after work permits for our US associates. So at the same time, I was doing my CIPD qualification, and when I was done with the qualification, I kind of had such fantastic grounding, and I could make a choice of where I go with my career in HR. And for me, the absolute natural choice was business partnering. I like the Ulrichs model, and I had to make a move to a large organization that had this model in its structure. So then I spent a few years moving from one organization to another, always bigger, as an HR business partner, looking after larger client groups, dealing with much more bigger sort of issues and problems and challenges, and getting exposure to bigger projects. And as an HR business partner, I came to BDO some time ago, and after a couple of years, I switched to the business role there. So the funny story is that, of course, our head of tax came to me to ask me to write a role definition for this brand new role that they wanted to introduce. I did the role definition, and I thought, that sounds great. Could I apply? And he said, well, never thought about it, but why not? And I went through the normal process, competing against other candidates, and I led the role. And I've never looked back. So nice. That's a bit of a story there.
Perfect. No, that's a perfect summary. Okay, so I know some of this will always be serendipity, you doing the job description with your HR hat on, but had moving into a business role always appealed to you in your career?
I would say that's probably true. And I think this is what was behind my choice of HR business partner as a way to progress in my career. I had interest in lots of different things. I have to say that at times I was really, really torn and really pulled into learning and development, because that's my passion. Personal professional development is a passion of mine. I also really enjoyed recruitment. Really did. There was something about this, that the whole networking and really understanding what different parts of the business do, that was really, really, really interesting. But I always made this conscious choice that I wanted to stay quite broad and much more commercial, much more closer to the business in my HR business partner roles. And and always was interested in general business running. And I saw myself, if you look back at the really beginning, what I wanted to be when I grow up. And if you ask my 18-year-old that kind of question, I always saw myself as a business manager, business leader, not specifically HR. So yeah, that was a kind of natural drive for me to find an opportunity to transition one day.
Okay, so interesting. So you're putting together this strategy and operations director profile, and suddenly the HR business partner is applying for the role. So how did the business react? I mean, you said that your boss was a bit surprised, but said okay then. But how has that stigma come with you in the business? Are you still perceived as an HR person? Has that been good or bad?
I think by now, 6 years in, people have forgotten. My role has changed so many times, and I've written many more role definitions for my evolving role. And I think the reason why it was possible for me, I think it's because actually they did see me as a commercial business leader, even before I applied for the role. So I think very often people think that commerciality has something to do with you being really versed in the spreadsheets and a balance sheet, and coming from finance background, having similar qualification. And I think it's misconception. I think ultimately what a business leader, when they say this person is commercial, what they mean is they get my business, they know and understand my business. So the reason why it was possible for me was because I always took my HR business partnership role very seriously, in that I needed to know that business in order to be really good connected to all the HR services that were sitting behind me. And I always needed to be contextual in my approach. And you can't be contextual unless you understand what are the services that we're providing, what's the market like, what people do day in and day out, and really having very close relationships with the business leaders who would be actually totally comfortable at the end of the day to work with you on a slightly different type of work, not on people related issues.
Yeah. Okay. So what you're saying is that as a business partner in an HR position, knowing the commercial objectives and understanding the business, which you should be doing as a business partner, actually qualifies you to go into a business focused role.
That is true. And I would say one more thing, Hugo, and that is that, again, HR career, what it allows you to do, it allows you to develop particular skills that are fundamentally leadership skills. So I think it's easy to switch careers when you're either very, very early in your career. So if you're an HR assistant, you can go to a finance department, be a finance assistant. You're good at organization and administration. But equally, when you get to really senior level, which I was in HR at that point, again, you can switch if you've got the underlying skills of, strong communication skills, strong advisory skills, strategic thinking skills. Then you can switch to a different part of the business and contribute and add value. So I think that would be another element to it.
Sure. And do you think there have been specific advantages in your current role for having come from HR? And in fact, flipping that over, have there been any areas that you've needed to develop fast that you didn't that you didn't receive in HR?
It's a really good question. Yes to both.
Okay.
So I do think that HR background was very, very helpful, because ultimately, as I said, it's when you come into strategy, and ultimately what's important is not strategizing and philosophizing. It's about implementation. And when you get to implementation, it's really deep understanding of human behavior that is at play. And who can be better at that than HR professionals who have done that, the entire career, really understanding people's motivation and what makes them behave one way or the other. So that in that place, it was absolutely critical. As I said, business organizational design and organizational development comes into play, and that is very useful background. And another advantage I think that HR professionals have is that, and I was HR business partner to a variety of business functions. In 17 years, you can imagine I've come across every single possible function, department type of role in an organization. So what you do know, you actually have quite good appreciation as an HR person, what it actually takes to do a role. So you come with a bit of that, knowledge. What you have to learn very quickly, at least, in my role that I had to learn. I developed knowledge, expertise, and skills in the last 6 years, and a number of very interesting functions where, again, I would be quite tempted at times to specialize in, and I'm trying to hold myself back. One of them was internal communications, because you have to communicate strategy in a way that is understood throughout the organization, all the different layers, and there is an art to it. And our internal comms is fabulous, and I've worked very closely and learned a lot, and now built a team so that's of specialists in that particular function. And another thing I had to learn really fast, and I'm still learning, and it's again another great area where one could specialize, that is change management and project management. Again, now I've got a team, and I've given an opportunity to lots of other people to transition into a different role. But yeah, that is tough. And you do have to get your understanding of the balance sheet a little bit. You do need to understand the key levers, commercial levers that drive the financials of the organization. So that was another area I would say. Those three would be the key where I had to really get up to speed fast.
Okay. And what about the other thing that I wanted to ask was your interaction with HR? Do you think you're a kinder stakeholder because you know their pain?
I would really hope that my colleagues in HR would say that, and I do know that a number of times when we had a new HR business partner coming to work with the tax business, I would say, I know your pain, because I was in exactly your shoes, and I'm not just saying figuratively because I was doing this job. So it absolutely helps. I understand what is the challenge of being in a function where, especially when you sit between two functions, of course, right? Because you can go native and be part of the business, really understand the business, yet your reporting line is still in the HR function. It's not an easy place to be. So I do feel that I have quite a good understanding of the challenges.
Okay, and so I was keen to find out, why do you think it's so rare that HR people move into a business function? Is that because they don't necessarily aspire to be a business leader in that sense, or that the business kind of puts a lid on it and won't allow them to apply for these types of roles?
I think it's a bit of both. I do think that there is a real actual pleasure of being a specialist. You are the best at something, and everyone comes to you because you know this area. And to branch out, you need at some point in your life to go in and out of specialism and become a bit of a generalist, which is a different proposition. And you need to step out of your comfort zone and be in a room where you walk in and you don't know how the conversation is going to go, and you can't feel as comfortable as you do in your own specialism. So I understand that some people would not want to jump around, throughout their career, but get really good and like world class at what they do. But the ones who do want, I think there are a couple of things to consider here. One of the things that I've heard a lot from HR colleagues over the years, and I think it's a bit of a misconception, is that piece, I don't really need to know that much about the business, because people are people everywhere, human beings. And I would say yes and no. People are people, but people behave really differently depending on their context. And if you work in different parts of the organization, you provide different kinds of services to different kinds of clients, your world is different and you behave differently. And unless you get to know, as we said before, the context, the business context, you wouldn't be able to do that. And perhaps another thing is, I don't know how much time and effort people spend on building relationships with senior stakeholders across the business, and not just in the client groups that you look after. You really have to go broader. You really have to go out of your way to find reasons to be friends with people in other departments, to lend your hand in projects that are cross-functional projects. And that requires, again, additional discretionary effort, time. Yeah. So maybe these could be the reasons why it is difficult. Is there perception? Of course, we all deal with unconscious bias, right? Whatever characteristic you take, HR is just one of the many characteristics where people would have perceptions. But you can bust those very quickly. People still buy people. I see someone in front of you, and you come across as you know what you're doing, and you can add value and make a contribution. So.
And I think that relationship building piece is very important. It's interesting that your move came internally. You know, I think it would be very difficult for an HR person to apply for a business lead role in another company. But if you've got the currency and the relationships in your current organization, then that's probably the easiest way to make the switch if you want to. So we're drawing to a close. I just wanted to ask you whether you have any regrets. Do you miss HR?
Oh, would it be really bad to say that I don't, given your audience? No, I don't have any regrets. I'm really excited about where my role is going. I'm keep adding different experiences, so I haven't lost anything. I just keep adding, and I think yeah, that's probably is the very honest answer from me.
Good. Well, listen, Olga, thank you so much for your time today. It's really pleasing to hear your story, and I know as a business we really hope that more people within HR, whether they want to go for it or not, are at least considered for these senior business level roles. So thank you very much for your time.
That was my pleasure. Thank you, Hugo.